We all know that for the last 4 years, the Biden administration has been completely derelict in its duty. The congressional Republicans, we here in the House and the Senate, have repeatedly asked the DHS under the Biden administration about the correlation, the obvious concern about terrorism and the wide open border. We cannot wait. We're 18 days away from President Trump being returned to the White House and us restoring real law and order in this country.
Yeah, there won't be real law and order in this country until that felon gets in the White House. But anyway, look, now we all know by this point that Mike Johnson, just implying that it's a migrant. The open border allowed a migrant in, then they committed a terror attack. It's dead wrong. And the fact that Mike Johnson is no more responsible or cautious about leaping to those sorts of conclusions than Donald Trump should also be deeply distressing, since Trump's supposed to be the wild card. Mike Johnson is a serious politician doing the exact same thing that Donald Trump is. Also, since you had been sounding the alarm for years about how irresponsible Joe Biden was, that's why you supported the border bill last year, right? Right, Johnson? It was such a serious issue at the border. That's why you supported the border bill. Set all of that stuff aside. This is Biden's fault. That's what Johnson would have you believe. Not the mayor, not the governor, not anything. And literally, if a terror attack happens when a person's president, they're responsible. And I point this out to you as an interesting historic relic because it won't be applicable in about 3 weeks. That will no longer be the case. If an act of terror, an act of violence happens, right now, it's the reason Biden needs to get out and we need new leadership. The causality is gonna be a little bit different in 3 weeks because terror attacks will still happen because we live in a messed up world and you can't constantly police 300 million people across a massive country. You can guarantee there will be acts of terror, but you can also guarantee that when those acts of terror happen in a month, in 6 months, in 2 years, they will not be evidence as they are now that we need new leadership. They will not be a reason for Donald Trump to be thrown out of office. No, instead, they will be proof that he needs more power. He needs more control over what happens. This attack happened even though it's not a migrant because the border was open. Well, they're gonna clamp down on the border and yet violence is still gonna happen. Is that proof that that wasn't actually a solution? No, it's gonna be a proof that we need to do more. We need to go into more neighborhoods. We need to root out more migrants. When Biden's in charge, this attack is a refutation of everything he's ever said. When Trump is in charge, it's gonna be a confirmation of everything that Donald Trump and Mike Johnson and Marjorie Greene, which maybe we'll get to, say. Isn't it amazing how causality changes once the inauguration happens? Francesca, what do you think?
I'm just so excited for, it's like the one silver lining of Trump being back in office is they will have no one else to blame. I mean, they'll try to.
The migrants.
Right, exactly. They'll have, but like, it just politically, like stop blaming Biden is gonna be good. Sure. Although maybe not, maybe he should take the heat for everybody. Even though, again, under Biden, there's been a record low border crossing, like through his CBP1 app, which, John, mark my words, obviously, Donald Trump's ICE is going to absolutely continue to use, right? It's just gonna now be invested by like Peter Thiel, because he was pissed that it's like an app that he's not invested in, it's not privatized, so like, screw that. So like, but they're gonna do the same thing. Biden continued the same border policies as who? As Donald Trump. And Trump's gonna continue the same, it's just gonna be on and on and on. And this is the real question because you think about it and we're like, my heart palpitations. Like I get so upset and at my wit's end because you're like these cycles of violence, of US military violence, of then that violence translating to its veterans, of those veterans being radicalized in however they're gonna be radicalized, attacking Americans, or attacking one another. There was a mass shooting on a base a few years ago also. Like these things continue to happen. And what the world that MAGA wants to build is one, honestly, it looks like occupied Palestine, if I'm being completely 100% with you. It looks like Jerusalem. Like it looks like a world where there are multiple cameras on every single corner, massive walls built between you and the poors. Hopefully you're not a poor, right? And between you and the religious minorities, and between you and the deportation internment camps that are gonna be over there, right? And so long as we all live through checkpoints, imagine TSA security, but for every single daily, movement of your life. So long as we live like that, we can finally, John, be secure. Are we free? Ooh, tough one. But somehow there's security. Oh, until there's not security. But like, This is the hellscape dystopia that the so-called movement for freedom wants for us. And us is a very important term. Who is in the us and who's not?
Yeah, you are 100% right. People are saying, by the way, that mass shooting, that was the same base where this guy came from. That's what people are saying. I can't confirm that right now, but that's what they're saying. Yeah, and you're totally right. And by the way, like, I'm not even saying like so I want to like identify that this thing where if bad things happen, it's the Democrats' fault. If bad things happen when it's a Republican, we just need to give them more imperial power. That's not new. That's not a Trump thing or whatever. Like George W. Bush, he was buoyed. He had more support as a result of 9/11. Does anyone doubt that if Al Gore had been president when that happened, they wouldn't have said that it's Democrat weakness that's inviting these sorts of attacks? Yeah. And by the way, I think the entire thing is BS because again, terror attacks can happen. Like you should have good policies, and I do worry about what Donald Trump is going to do. I'm not saying that presidents can't have any effect on this, but the idea that simply because you're in the White House, you're responsible for everything that happens across 50 states with literally hundreds of millions of people seems utterly absurd. But equally absurd is if you are going to imply that there's some sort of responsibility or causality, then could the media at least be a little bit even-handed with that? Because I think that the media is just honestly, they're terrified of saying it's Trump's fault or it's Bush's fault or whatever. They wouldn't do that, but they are super comfortable pointing at a Democrat and saying it's because they don't like the military. They're not strong enough. Even though with Donald Trump, we have someone who literally despises the military more than every Democrat combined. Yes. It's all BS from floor to ceiling.
Well, it's really important for the media to do its job to actually connect the dots that no politician will connect and remind us of all of the instances of violence that stemmed from, either current or former military, right? And again, this is not like, but we can't do anything. If you talk about how mass shooters are 99.9% male, someone will be like, but there was one trans person who I thought was trans, like, or the one woman. You're just like, no, man, there's something deeper happening. And if the US military, hey, what is our protocols for recruitment? They're lower and lower every single year. How do we make sure the violence that we wage abroad does not infect the violence inside one's head? I would argue that's inseparable. But hey, it's just, so again, I do think the media has a role to play to talk about how, I'm looking at, articles about, the tracking of violent extremism within the military. It's like there's many studies that have been issued, a lot of reports, but under a Pete Hegseth, DOD, does anyone think we're gonna hear anything about that, to say nothing of sexual assault?
Yeah, all very frustrating.